Welcome, everyone, to this presentation in Best Practices in Breaking the Chain of Incivility. My name is Rebecca Rowe, and I'm an adjunct faculty at Lanier Technical College in Northeast Georgia. I'm currently a DMP student in the University of North Georgia, completing my DMP in May of 2025. So I hope you enjoy this presentation. It's hard to believe that the very profession that's purported to be caring and compassionate to others can be so difficult to work in. And instead of building new nurses up, experienced or not, it seems the hazing and incivility and sometimes outright bullying is one of the leading causes nurses leave the workplace and even the profession altogether. And this is an unnecessary behavior that has shot nursing profession in the foot. Much time and effort and money is allocated to training essential nurses for the future, just to see them leave within a few years of their licensure. And something must change. Chain of incivility must be broken. And it's going to take all of us, from students, faculty, workplace leaders, and peers, to turn this tide and to make this a world of civility where we, despite our many differences, learn to appreciate and respect each other for what we bring to the profession. The purpose of this presentation is to spend some time in reflection, looking backward and forward from our current state and imagine what our world could look like and how we can transform our nursing culture. And my aim is to offer you some of the best practices for breaking this chain of incivility and provide an antidote to the poison of incivility. John Dewey, who was an American philosopher and psychologist, once said, "We don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience." So, with that in mind, we'll get started. The objectives of this presentation are going to be to compare and contrast civility and incivility, list some contributing factors to incivility, examine the consequences if we do not address incivility, and discuss 8 best practices supporting a civil culture. So I performed a literature search using some of the databases that are available to me through the academic environment. And I asked this question: how can I break the chain of incivility in an academic and clinical workplace? And the keywords I used included a multitude of things ranging from incivility all the way to power, to cyberbullying, to aggression, to nursing and healthcare, and student toxic culture, etc. And over 75 articles were reviewed, and 28 peer-reviewed articles were selected that met the criteria to give me the best practices, beginning in 2020, giving me the last 5 years of current information and research. And these offered a wide variety of themes and locations where incivility was studied. And from this review, some evidence-based practices emerged that suggested improved outcomes in nursing practice related to patient safety, mental health, retention, job satisfaction, leadership style preferences, disciplinary strategies, and professional development options. The strategies that organizations took after Joint Commission became involved in addressing incivility in 2008 included addressing disruptive behaviors when they occur, developing a zero tolerance policies, an organization wide code of conduct, mandating annual education for leaders, staff, and new hires on orientation, implementing administrative follow through for reports of incivility or bullying, and taking disciplinary action as necessary. In 2014, the IHI Quadruple Aim added incivility and burnout to their list of goals to improve the workplace in healthcare. And in 2015, the American Nurses Association um, created a code of ethics, which included an update to maintain civility and respect among our peers. In 2020, 23, COVID hit, and everything that we were doing to improve these areas kind of took a standstill. 2022 Joint Commission mandated that all accredited hospitals had to meet mandates for civility. And in 2023, the Magnet Manual included updates and definitions and includes changes in assessing and attaining status if these areas in incivility are not satisfied. Well, all these strategies sound good and satisfy the regulatory agencies, but when placed in policy, in order to maintain accreditation and not be cited, they have to be executed as written, or you risk the citation and penalty. So, what happens if administrators, leaders, or faculty are the bullies too? What happens then? What do you have to your defense as an employee or as a student? So, as I said, COVID hit and all these strategies were implemented, and what was simmering uh, in incivility came to a full boil soon after because of uncertainty, stress, and fear, lack of supplies, anxiety, fatigue, and total burnout. Society was on lockdown. So outside of our work life, our peers were sick, schools were closed, many nurses left the workplace for lucrative travel assignments, or they went ahead and took early retirement, or they got sick themselves, and millions of people were dying. And some of our peers were not well afterwards and still suffer from chronic issues related to COVID. It was a big change in our life, and many physical and mental conditions went untreated and exacerbated during the years of the pandemic. And some of those consequences continue to play out in society today. And civility continues to seem to be in the decline everywhere. But truly, civility matters. I saw this emblem that you see at the bottom, funny on Etsy, and when I went back and looked up what the term meant on this particular emblem, it is a Latin term which is Spiritus Durisma Coquit. It's a Latin phrase that translates to courage digests the hardest things or the spirit digests the hardest things. And it's often associated with the legend that the ostrich can even digest iron. And in reality, the ostrich will eat something like a nail, but they will excrete it just the way that they ate it. So they never digest it. So the phrase is depicted in this 16th century emblem and symbolizing the power of courage and endurance to overcome diversity, which is what we in healthcare had to endure through the COVID pandemic and continues to happen throughout the world today. So why is this topic so important? And I feel silly really answering this question because the more important question to me is why do we continue after all these efforts and mandates to stop this type of behavior? We continue to see it exist. Why go to all the trouble to train nurses, to have them spend all the money being trained and then have them leave because of how they were treated? In one word, it's unsustainable. We are facing a nursing shortage nationally. There is a projected shortage of over 78,000 full time equivalent nurses this year, and a shortage of 63,720 full time RNs in 2030. And Georgia is one of the 10 states with a projected 21% shortage in 2035. And that came from the National Center for Health Workforce Analysis, and that was done in 2022. And I'm sure that we are trying to address those shortages right now. It's not fast enough. We will not make it. 77 to 85% of all the nurses have been bullied or suffered horizontal or lateral violence in school or in the workplace. And horizontal violence is incivility from the top down, and this can be from faculty to student, or from nurse leaders in the workplace, or from doctors to nurses, or administrators to fellow nurses. Lateral violence is incivility from peer to peer, where someone is acting out intimidating or aggressive behavior that interferes with performance. Either way, instead of building up a person, it breaks the individual and lowers their self esteem. The impacts of this type of behavior is energy sapping, and in nursing, that means it turns the focus from the patient to survival or fight or flight response within the nurse. It causes nurses to leave the workplace or start having poor school participation. This type of trauma can cause long term psychological and emotional effects and can even result in suicide. The ripple effects of even witnessing these types of events and not doing anything about them has detrimental effects on individuals and group morale. So having this education that we're having right now has evidence behind it supporting the ability to raise awareness and provide some best practices to use to counteract this incivility, no matter where you may be on the spectrum of your nursing career. So, what can we do as individuals to fight incivility of bullying? Do we stand by and let it happen, be a bystander, or do we intervene and be an upstander? Lateral violence is a man made disease, and I call it a disease because it is exactly what's infected our workplace for many, many years. The vulnerable nursing student in this particular illustration is the host. And they fit the criteria of being an oppressed group because oppressed group behavior theory in theory says that members of this case nursing students feel are powerless due to one group stronger than they are. The students feel powerless to change their situation so that they have to lash out at their fellow students, compete against them or bully them to feel more empowered for the moment. Nursing students may also be in a cohort that they see every day for years, which may breed some contempt. You learn each other very well and you know what each other is like, and it becomes irritating. It's like being in a long-term relationship. Some things are very great and you get along very well, and then sometimes just the mere look at someone that you know and you're familiar with, you just don't want to be around them that day. Treatment is to engage in education, and one of the best treatment modalities is cognitive rehearsal. And this is the antidote for incivility. Cognitive rehearsal is education meant to instruct students on how lateral incivility developed and what they may encounter and the effects of these behaviors on everyone. The scenarios are role played with scripting to rehearse and learn to help confront and stop incivility. This education provides ways to recognize incivility, professional ways to confront it, depersonalize it, and it also helps ways to address victims and intervene for witnesses. It gives them opportunities to use skills to intervene and help the victim and to shut down the bully and ensure an establishment of protection when reporting bullying and lateral violence, no matter who it is from. This empowerment, starting at the student level with appropriate professional responses, will be needed in the future because, once again, when nursing is in the workplace, they are also categorized in the oppressed group role, as historically nursing services has been placed under the realm of medicine, which claims all healthcare as its own because the structure of patient care begins with seeking physician led care. And just as students may lash out at peers, fellow nurses may do the same with their peers because they feel their contributions are not valued, even though nursing accepted the medical model within the hospital based system over the years. So we basically allowed ourselves to be in that situation because we had no other choice at the time. Things are changing slowly, but that's the way it is right now. And so we have to find ways to help each other. And that is our antidote to seeking a vaccine from this disease of incivility. So why is it so hard to implement? Well, change is hard in any way, and anytime we shake up the status quo, it is very difficult to make that change. And people have little trust in change until they see it proven, and they always want to see somebody to experiment with it first before they ever put it into practice. And that's why doctors of nursing practice are so important because we're the ones that try to help translate research into practice. So cognitive rehearsal has many pros and it has very little cons in the literature. But what I've experienced with any of these new initiatives, pushback is going to be inevitable. And so to have any successful engagement, you have to have strong leadership support. Formal leadership management is responsible, that's their job, for making incivility training happen. And that means supporting it, encouraging it, and role modeling and rewarding expected behavior. It's not enough to give it lip service, you have to live it. So it is only through consistent leadership support and enforcement of expected behaviors that incivility will diminish. And those who practice incivility, lateral violence, or bullying will be removed or remediated depending on their willingness to improve their performance if they're given that chance. Based on the literature reviewed, there remains much to be learned. So, what we need more research on or improvement on are knowledge of results of these proactive preventive approaches. What's been learned from it? How many times has this been studied? Or is there enough research out there? And I can categorically say probably not. Clear standardized definitions on various forms of incivility with associated attributes, for example. What do we know about the definition of bullying? It changes from one place to another. Bullying is considered intentional, while incivility, even though it's in the same bulk category, is considered unintentional. Many times people do things out of pressure or workplace circumstances, and it is not meant to be taken in a personal way, but it's how we handle the aftermath of that insult or that uh, action that we must handle that wrongdoing. So more longitudinal, long-term studies on the impact of zero tolerance policies need to be addressed because do we let someone go on to enact the same behavior somewhere else when we release them, or do we try to remediate them before we let them go? And many times restorative justice is absent from some of these workplaces. They do not give people the chance to improve their performance or even have the um, courage to address those behaviors and make sure that that valued employee who's been there has the opportunity to remediate themselves. Manifestations, impact, and consequences of cyber incivility go unnoticed many, many times because a lot of times workplace they're not engaged in cyber or social media or have workplace social media accounts. But I guarantee you the consequences of cyberbullying can be devastating for a lifetime. And so we always tell students to be very careful of how, and work and employees as well, be very careful about how you post on social media, especially when you're wearing workplace or school logos, because that reflects on the organizations that you are associated with. Student experiences of incivility in clinical practice locations. Most of the time, these researches are done with surveys, anonymous surveys, or they ask permission to do the surveys. But what would be most helpful is if we actually had live interviews with students. That would be more meaningful, and if we could get people to open up and explain things in a very safe environment, that would be extremely beneficial. And then there is a pedagogy called liberation pedagogy to start eliminating oppressive group behavior. And this sounds very radical, but actually, what we're trying to do with this type of pedagogy is to look into how you can liberate people from this underling type or oppressed group mentality and what you can do to strengthen your ability to be empowered instead of powerless. And then ways to improve caring and professionally in the environment. There's a lot of times, and I've noticed when we do kindness campaigns and other campaigns, they give you prizes and things like that. We've actually seen incivility rise temporarily until these roles catch on. And so it takes a moment for these caring and kindness events to actually make a difference. And so it takes a minute for you to see exactly what the results of some of these things are. These are things that you should be doing all the time. But when they're forced on people, sometimes the backlash is there for a few months and then it will die out. And then people will accept those types of exercises or um, campaigns in the workplace, and they'll take it as the norm. It takes a moment for that to actually work. There has to be some patience. So, the application to education is about evidence based training. And as I said, nursing education is the antidote for, or education in general is the antidote for incivility. And nursing education implements educational professionalism to include attitudes and behaviors leading to positive work environments. Collaboration and professional civil discourse is really on the rise, especially with new medical staff and nursing staff and collaborative care education with physical therapists, respiratory therapists, pharmacists, a whole collaborative team approach, especially in some courses like ethics and others that could be generalized into all disciplines. These type of courses help us work together to understand each other's viewpoint and where each other's coming from because they all come from different perspectives. And as I said, medicine is generally a physician to patient led starting point. And so if we understand how that works and we understand how that trust bond is formed with the physician, we can understand how they are so protective of that bond and how nursing is seen somewhat as not knowing everything about that patient, even though we think we have a great insight into that patient. And we may know things that doctors don't know. So these are the things that having that interdisciplinary education is really important. So all of these areas, the cognitive rehearsal simulation, um, the microaggressions triangle model, those types of things are things that we can do internally that we can use our own trainers or we can hire actors to come in and help us with simulation. They give us tools, they give us scripts. We can write our own scripts. We can make it what we want to make it. Other areas like the Workplace Bullying University or Team Steps or Healthy Workforce Academy, sometimes they have free and sometimes they have streaming and sometimes they have on site training for organizations at cost. So you have to look into that and see what your finances are. And then your learning management system, of course, will have your set annual education events required by accreditation. So your learning management system, your LMS is what you're called, will have your computer-based learning modules that are required either in your school or in your employee-related annual education. So what happens if we don't do anything about incivility? Well, it's not a very good place to be. Consequences of not having education and training to equip nurses to manage incivility or bullying uh, is has consequences, negative consequences, and leaders must take note of this. And mostly includes high-level executive leaders who are responsible for organizational administration oversight. If you notice, not managing incivility tends to take a cascading effect downward. If one cannot work in an environment where you're free to do the work that you're assigned or expected to do, the stress becomes cumulative on the mind, body, and spirit of the person, and it impairs the person. Learning and concentration occurs. There's no learning that occurs when an incivility occurs, and it causes the priority to go to processing the reasons why this happened to you, how to respond to it, and what to do about it. And this is called cognitive load. And this causes an increase in medical errors also, which has been documented due to not focusing on the patient. Your rate of falls will increase. Your medication errors will increase. Care can be delayed or even missed. Your grades in school begin to decline. Your interest in class or your work declines. So if you cannot trust your colleagues or your group, if you can't participate in anything because you feel that you're being picked on or you just have lost trust in your group, then that communication tends to decrease along with that participation. This leads to a decreased quality of experience and overall dissatisfaction with your life at work and with your life in school. And people will tend to isolate themselves and withdraw. And this could lead to very tragic consequences, as you can imagine, such as violent outbursts or even self harm. And we have seen that happen over and over again, too many times. So, what can we do? Well, as promised, I offer you 8 best practices for managing incivility. And you may think we have these things in place already, but they must be more than just words on paper or in a policy manual that just is trotted out once a year in annual training or in your requirements to be able to proceed in school. So let's dive into these things a bit and see what's different. So, number one, clear codes of conduct. Not only including signing agreements at the start of a job or at the beginning of a course, but they need to include clearly defined expectations, not in legalese, but in terms that everyone can understand. Professional behavior, what that means, examples, respect, collegiality, working together. This agreement should be reviewed by leadership each year and signed by students, faculty, and employees. One nursing program proposed an incivility care plan where the faculty and nursing program director developed this incivility care plan using the nursing process, API, and the American Psychological Association's 5 essential components to healthy workplace practices, stating the problem as civility, the cause of it as work pressures, differences of opinions or ideas, the signs and symptoms as backbiting, rudeness, discussing dissatisfaction at work. Short and long term measurable goals were established, and that helped them define and put a name on the things that they were trying to eradicate. Number two, promote and embody a culture of respect and collaboration. I found that the more diversity in the workplace in this research, the higher the level of incivility. So if the goal worldwide is to have a workforce that generally reflects the population of who we're serving, then we have to have more diversity. There are riches found in differences, but if one looks at the disease of incivility, it relies on poor self esteem and lack of confidence to drive the need to be more powerful or popular than anyone else. The height of civility is valuing everyone by elevating them and empowering them to be the best that they can be. And if you can go back to the first slide that I showed you, do you want to be the one that lifts people up, or do you want to be the one that defeats people? So this is what we're working toward, is the more diverse your culture means, and even if you are in the diverse culture, it doesn't mean eradicating what was the most populace of the group before it became more diverse. The more diverse means the more diverse. That means that everybody has a more equitable piece of the pie or a place at the table. That's what we're striving for. And it's going to take time to get there. Transformational leaders and authentic leaders play a pivotal role in supporting professional civil behaviors and have specific unit based or department based expectations managed consistently. And that's what changes the game. When you work for a leader that's transformational and authentic, you are willing to do whatever they ask you to do. Anything less than that, transactional or authoritative or laissez faire, where they just let anything go, you have a sense of this person does not respect themselves and they don't respect this workplace. And so things tend to go downhill very quickly. Recognizing and rewarding exemplary behavior through posting characteristics of high performing teams. This is extremely important. Leaders support and role model this behavior, and they should inspire others by showing employees, peers, and students how amazing they are at demonstrating characteristics when you see them. The mechanisms for awards and are springing up everywhere, and they should be based on meaningful criteria, not popularity, favoritism, or things that are just written because somebody wants an award. They have to be authentic. Recognizing volunteerism, accomplishments, genuine acts of kindness, many others. There should be intentional and planned events to celebrate these events and accomplishments. And this establishes a positive culture of trust and respect. And it needs to be done, carved out, and sacred, because many times these events are looked over or passed over because of events in the clinical areas. And these events really need to be carved out and respected and covered. Establishing a mentorship program comes and goes. In academia, it is more prevalent because of the availability and work schedules, but they can help new nurses navigate the workplace. Senior nurses can help freshman students acclimate to campus life and college demands. Professional mentors should match up personality wise. It's discouraging when a mentor and a mentee don't have good chemistry together. Mentees should have some kind of benefit from the mentor's wisdom and experience, and they should be able to give honest and factual advice without repercussions. Sometimes people hear things that they don't want to hear, but that's what mentors are there for. And that only occurs when you have developed a trusting relationship with the mentee and vice versa. And so the relationship has to be one of trust and understanding because it's a long term relationship. That's the goal. Preceptor has a short term relationship, but a mentor has a long term relationship, sometimes a lifetime. And helping match up those mentor to mentees is the challenge because you want mentors to be matched well or volunteer or help select or mentees select who they want to be mentored by. So it's best to try and match and find that placement through preliminary placement surveys, bios, or meet and greets to find out details about each other so that you can make those good matches from the beginning. Number 5 is to provide professional development opportunities. This ensures professionals maintain opportunities to learn and grow, especially when related to building better teams or retaining nurses and building that positive culture of safety. And those are part of best practices anyway. So, interprofessional education is important to gain that insight with other disciplines, how to treat each other with mutual respect, and that involves nursing going outside of their particular specialty area or area of focus. Say med surge goes to maternal health, or you serve on different committees within the hospital or within the school. You're working with seniors to juniors, or you're working on say GANS or the Georgia nursing association with students, and you're trying to do some community service activities, and you're working with people of different backgrounds and different grade levels and different specialty focuses, and you're trying to make sure that you are doing the best for your community. Then you're ensuring an anonymity through reporting. It's important to ensure that incidents do not get ignored or underreported, and many will not report incidents for fear of retaliation or history that's shown that people were retaliated against. And so all it takes is one retaliation from someone before everything shuts down and people will not tell you what's going on. So many fear that they will become one of those who are exposed and targeted in the future. And many have to leave the department or workplace as a result. And so sometimes people will tell you to go to HR for some of these things, and you need to know. And most of these anti-bullying schools will tell you, yes, you could go to HR. Yes, you can do that. Follow your chain of command to get there, but make sure that you have a path for another job. As sad as it is to say. So cultures of safety have to protect the identity of those reporting incivility or unprofessional behavior, and want the higher chains of command to investigate. And so, in order to do that, there has to be that level of safety for the person that's a whistleblower or the one that is calling out the person that has been incivil. Hopefully, you can handle that at the one on one level. And hopefully, the person that's being accused of something has the opportunity to defend themselves and to figure out what in the world happened. So one of the last two is consider restorative justice instead of zero tolerance for anyone that's had an accusation against them and working for or involved in a zero tolerance organization. The consequence can be devastating and life changing without due process. A student who puts out a false narrative about an instructor because they may have received a failing grade, or a leader who received one complaint over the course of years caused them to be suspended without warning. The process of restorative justice is a mindset and a practice that builds mutual understanding and invites accountability for one's actions. It's asking the perpetrator to come forward and say, what could you do better? How can you restore peace and tranquility? Or how can you repay for what you've done wrong? Or how can you train to be better? Or how can you be remediated? It gives them a chance to make better. And they have the opportunity to do it or not do it. And in that case, you know what the answer is. If they decide not to, then they have to go. But if they do want to do better, they could end up being the best employee you ever had or the best student you ever had. So a mistake may be one of those things that would be the change agent for that person's life. A just culture is an example of restorative justice if it's used correctly. So many corporate entities don't use it because it relies on that transparency, as I told you, which for some who operate behind closed doors find it too much of a risk. Unfortunate. This is something to consider when you value employees with experience and a long track record. Regular evaluations and reviews are valuable tools when done more than one time a year. You don't want to wait till the very end of the year to do it. You have a whole year to check in and make notes. And at least mid-year it should be done to do a mid-year evaluation to see if there's any of these issues that have arisen during the year, to find if there are ways to clean up or to do more work or to remediate or continue doing good work or whatever. But there's a way to check in and find out how things are going, not only in the professional life, but in their personal life as well, just to check in and make sure that they're doing okay. So it is a very, from a leadership perspective, this is a very good thing to do because it shows that you actually know your employees, got to know them a little bit more. If you have a lot of employees, this is a daunting task, no doubt. But it's very important that you get to know your employees and then you get to know what's going on with them personally and professionally so that you have a form of reference and a way to relate and connect. Connections are the key to retention. And if there was an equation for retention, it would be that connection equals retention. So I just like to keep that in mind when you're thinking about retaining employees and maintaining keeping our nurses as we train them. So breaking the chain of incivility is an ongoing, sustained effort, and it takes commitment from all members of the nursing community. It's important to approach this issue with sensitivity and a focus on continuous improvement with evidence-based practice. Imagine it starting in schools of nursing, equipping the future nurses to lead the way in making work a thing of joy and meaning. Can you do that? Can we do that? I think we can. I think we can break the chain. I think we can be empowered. And I think we can stop incivility by being honest, transparent, handle our differences openly, quickly, and move on. And I think that is the answer to having joy in work and making connections and being better peers, better colleagues, and better nurses in the process. So thank you very much for attending today. Appreciate it. Here are my resources.